Alright, so starting back where we were, after we opened up this access and got into the pulp chamber, and you smooth the entrance just a little bit, you'll take your Explorer and you'll start checking along the access for lipping, because you want to completely unroof that chamber. If you start feeling any catches, you can always just go back. You can use an Endo Z-burr, which is a carbide burr that is non-end cutting, and run that along the side, and that'll help you only cut the sides. Or you could just take your Kara green and just file everything away until you have a nice smooth access. After that, you can go and take your round 4 if you really want to, and put it on a slow speed handpiece and drop that into the chamber, making sure you don't create any ledges. You don't really want to be dragging along the plastic sides if you can help it. You want to just loosen up that pulp chamber just a little bit. And you could just do this whole thing from this point on with just hand instruments. You could just use a spoon excavator and excavate all the way down. If you do choose to use the Endo round 4, I would recommend that you only go down to maybe 6 millimeters, 5 millimeters in depth, because if you go too far and hit the floor, you could perf, you could fail. So it's always better to err on the side of caution. Just excavate the pulp, scrape it out with your spoon excavator, and you're good to go. You want to take your Explorer and then just drop that in and find that canal. Obviously you use an Endo Explorer for this portion, just as a little pointier at the tip and less likely to break along the markings. So it'll just drop right in, drop right in, drop right in, nice and smooth all the way down. If it's not smooth and you feel a ledge, you just take your Kara green, and you can run it if you'd like, or you can use Endo Z-burr and run that if you like. I prefer to either use the Endo Z or just the Kara green, and just hand file that smooth. If you're having difficulties finding the canals, you can always use your K-files. I don't have any on me, but you can take a K-file and gently use it to find out where that canal is. And as long as you memorized, where the canals are on your practice teeth, they'll be in a very, very similar location on the day of the exam. Just make sure you don't put too much pressure, because if you put a lot of pressure on a strong K-file, you could create your own canal, and then you would perf, and then you would fail. And this is really only in the case of an emergency where you can't find that canal with your Endo Explorer. So if you can't stab the floor, find out where it's dropping in, and you're starting to panic, just slow down, grab a 10 or 15 file, and just look for those last canals you can't find. Once you find it, just clean it up a little bit. If you use a perio probe, what's interesting is that the millimeter markings are indented on the perio probe, and you can almost use them as a file. You just have to be very careful not to get it stuck in the canal, because if you get it stuck in the canal and you snap, then you're done. So make sure you have a nice fresh perio probe that has no real bend to it and is is sound. And then you can use that to kind of scrape and file just a little bit more. When doing this tooth in particular, during our exam, alcohol was used to kind of loosen that wax. There has been a change to the manual in 2022 for another portion of the exam, the perio exam, where it says no solvents are to be used that are not normally used for the clinical procedure. So just make sure you double check and see if you can use alcohol in an endo procedure for irrigation of the pulp chamber. If you can, then you can use it. You can probably use it during the exam to help loosen up that pulp. Make sure you know the depths as well as the measurements you need from the marginal ridge and from, so 2 millimeters here, 1 millimeter here, 1 millimeter here, 1 millimeter here, and make sure you also know the depths. So you don't want to be less than 2.5 millimeters in diameter on the axis, or you will automatically fail. That should cover most of it for this portion. Just remember, if you want to, you can make your life very easy by just drawing everything out and then just cutting a hole, and just, once you start practicing, memorize where those canals are. And if you cut your hole the same time every time, you should be okay, because it's a plastic tooth, it's not real life, and the canal should be in the same spot every time. So with enough practice, there should be no surprises. For obturation of the anterior, there's, well, I guess for cleaning the canal, you can do two different ways. A lot of people used a BR file to length, and that gave them, you know, a nice access. Gave them clean all the way down to the base. I used a step back method with KR files, and I'll write that down and make that available. The other thing is, before the exam even starts, you're going to have this tooth measured. They'll actually have you measure with a Bowley gauge. And then you're going to measure that, write it down on your paper, and then have that initialed. That way you know the exact length of this tooth. And then after that, you'll be able to know the exact length of the root. So there's two different ways to fill once you get everything cleaned out. I use the standard burn off method. So coat my gutta percha in sealer, stick it in, make sure that it's to length by measuring, and then just burning it off right at the CEJ. Other people measured how long the root was, cut their gutta percha at 14 millimeters, covered in sealer, shoved it in, and then they didn't have to worry about burning it off. Only problem with that is it makes it difficult to tell if you're going too far. But if you have a strong apical seat, that gutta percha shouldn't go past where your apical seat is, and you shouldn't perf out the bottom. And so you should have a nice clean fill without much error. And that's just something you have to decide for yourself, which method you'd like to use, which one works best in your hands.